Hello, this is take two because I just restarted this after blathering for 5 minutes. But this morning when I was at work, I was listening to an interview with Darren, is it Malakian? Malakian, I think it is, the guitarist from System of a Down, and also Scars on Broadway, which is actually what he was mostly talking about in the interview because I think they just released a new album. But he talked, he was pretty happy. You know, some artists don't like to talk about their old stuff. They want to focus on the new thing. They're kind of, selling the new album, which I understand. But he seemed happy to kind of talk about his career and his life and when he was younger and his time in System of a Down and kind of that band and their music as well as his own stuff. So it was a good interview. He was interesting. And so it kind of put me in the mood to listen to System of a Down, which I have been throughout the day. And I thought I'd look at what CDs I have of theirs. Now, this one here I've actually shown before when I first bought it. But I don't think I talked about it in depth. So this is their debut album, which is self-titled. The album System of a Down by System of a Down. The hand reaching out. This came out in '98. So kind of right in that, what would you call 98 in the terms of new metal? Now, a lot of people, that term new metal is kind of like hair metal, is a kind of like a derided genre, isn't it? Even now, even though so much modern metal has new metal influences, so a lot of the riffs you hear in modern metal bands, metalcore bands, there's definitely an influence from new metal, at least some aspect of it. But I guess it became so, bands like Limp Bizkit, and really Limp Bizkit by themselves did a lot to kind of wreck the genre. Even though I've got a soft spot for Limp Bizkit, when you say new metal, a lot of people just think of Fred Durst and kind of rap metal. But I think, and Darren actually talked about this in the interview, they kind of came up around the same time in LA as Korn and Deftones, even though Deftones were up in Sacramento. And, he talked about listening to the Korn's debut album and how different it was, how it was completely like nothing else. And so in that sense, that they came out at that time, and they're definitely, his guitar especially has got a new metal element to it. You can't say they are completely not new metal. They are a part of that, but they were kind of unique enough and different enough that they could kind of be their own thing beyond that. Because they're still massively popular. Even though they haven't released an album for 20 years, they still do tour, but their tours, they do pretty well. They don't do massive tours. They kind of do more like short runs of festival shows and things like that. They just did ones in South America, and I think it was John, the drummer, was posting videos of the crowds, and it was insane. It was, I don't know how many people, because it's hard to judge crowd sizes from videos, because sometimes you think, well, that's like 100,000 people, then you see it was only 10,000 or something, but it looked nuts. And they were like setting fires and setting off flares and fireworks in the crowd, and they had this drone fly over. I almost thought it was like an AI video. It was so insane. Obviously that's South America. In South America, they always say that if a band has lost their confidence, they should tour in South America, because a lot of these bands are just treated like royalty. And not just that, it's that the crowds down there are so great. They're like the perfect crowd. They're excited and happy that the band is there, and they are loud, and they sing, and everyone's seen the South American crowds before. So a lot of bands use South American concerts as concert DVDs, like AC/DC did their Argentina show back in, was it 2010, River Plate, and Megadeth did one also, one night in Buenos Aires. Anyway, what is my point of this? I don't even know. They're still popular, and yeah, they came out of that new metal kind of scene vaguely. And at that time, 1998, that was the same year as Follow the Leader by Korn, which is kind of, I guess, one of the biggest new metal albums. And a bunch of other releases I can't really remember off the top of my head. So this came out, but like I said, it's very different and unique, their sound. On this album, on all their albums, and whatever the reason is for that, like I guess the easy way to describe it and to explain it is their the cultural influence is that they're an Armenian band. And when I say Armenian, I say culturally Armenian. I think only the bassist Shavo was actually born in Armenia, and his parents, when it was still part of the Soviet Union, his parents left when he was a kid and came to America. Darren was born in America, in California, but his parents were Armenian by way of Iraq. Because a lot of Armenians fled Armenia throughout the 20th century due to like the genocide, the Ottoman Turk, was it like around 1915, I think, and then the Soviet Union, the chaos of that, retaking the Caucasus states. There was a lot of kind of reason, I guess, to go somewhere else. And so, like I said, Shavo was born in Armenia, Darren in America. Serge, the vocalist, and John, the drummer, they were both actually born in Lebanon, in Beirut. So I think there's quite a big Armenian diaspora in Lebanon and in Syria. I guess in the whole Middle East area. And then they moved to America from there. And so they grew up literally in these countries, and if not in the countries, in their families and in the community in America of the Armenian community, and would have heard that music, Middle Eastern music broadly, and Armenian, even though we wouldn't say Armenia is part of the Middle East, but kind of it's certainly influenced by and nearby, culturally and geographically. And so the use of those kinds of, I don't really know enough, but I guess Near Eastern scales or melodies, the kind of the melodic choices that maybe don't necessarily aren't what we would imagine as common in Western music. Now, I'm sure if there was a music theoretician or theory person, they could explain how with a typical melody, there's kinds of, notes and chords that follow each other and resolve nicely in the Western tradition. Like C, E, G, is that one? Or D, C, G, it's quite a common one. Whereas, or the note, again, I don't know enough about the scales and stuff like that, but then in other cultures, those scales and chord progressions and whatnot don't follow the same system necessarily, always. And so that's why you can hear certain things and go, oh, that sounds like an Arabian sound. Or if you hear like if you're watching a movie and the scene moves to China, and they use certain chord progressions or note, scales, and you think, well, that sounds Asian or whatever it might be. And so that they incorporated that into their music very well, I think. The combination of metal, modern metal, and whatever that would be called, what I just told you, influence from their own culture, I think they marry perfectly. However, you can't imagine if there was suddenly like a whole bunch of bands doing the same thing, it wouldn't be as effective. Part of their appeal is the novelty factor, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean, it's a lot of it, you never heard anything like that before. The combination of metal riffs and done with a different kind of scale, a kind of, like I said, Arabic or Near Eastern type scale. I haven't even got to the CDs yet. Jesus Christ. So this is they were signed by Rick Rubin to his label, to the American label. Or was it, I don't know if he signed it, but he's only signed to their label, and he produced this album. And a lot of their stuff is quite political. Not as political as, say, Rage Against the Machine or Refused or something like that, but they have a lot of lyrics specifically about the Armenian genocide, such as Pluck, P-L-U-C-K. That's explicitly about that. And on the other albums as well. And then more broadly, kind of like, you know, geopolitics and American imperialism and the war on drugs and all sorts of, you know, those kinds of things that you can imagine. They do talk about those things. So you could say they have a kind of a political bent, but not entirely. A song like Spiders, for example, which I think was the first song I ever heard of theirs, back in about probably just before Toxicity came out, because I remember hearing the stuff off this in late 2000, early 2001, and I'm pretty sure Toxicity came out right around August, September 2001. And the first song I ever heard, I downloaded Spiders, which is an amazing song. You know, again, talking about the marriage of kind of crushing guitar riffs and a kind of trying to explain it, what the other kind of element of there is, but it sounds hacky, whatever I say, but that kind of Eastern type scales, they do perfectly in that song. And then as much as Serge's voice is quite certainly non-traditional, you know, it's not the kind of guy, if you heard 5 hard rock heavy metal singers and he was in the lineup, he wouldn't be the first guy you would choose to be in your band. But his uniqueness works well with that kind of music. And really, sometimes a band needs that uniqueness to stand out. Like if they just had, I don't know, just your typical kind of hard rock vocalist as the singer of this band, I don't think they would be half as appealing as they are. So it's a pretty good debut album, considering. Well, not considering. I think it's a pretty good debut album, full stop. Quite bizarre, a lot of the songs, hearing these for the first time. I remember back then, like just quite like nutty, like weird. Sweet Pea, that kind of starts off like that. And then it kind of goes into the really kind of bouncy riff. Sugar, another kind of weird song, talking about mushroom people. Like I said, Spiders, got a beautiful song. War with a question mark. And like I said, P-L-U-C-K, so it stands for politically lying, unholy, cowardly killers, which is explicitly about the Armenian genocide and the what do you call it? The refusal to acknowledge or admit it from the Turkish government, the modern Turkish government. Elimination, die, why, walk down, a whole race genocide, take away all our pride, a whole race genocide, taken away, which them all fall down. Recognition, restoration, reparation. Well, they haven't recognized, they haven't restored, and they have not given any sort of reparations. And I think the Turkish government openly supports Azerbaijan. And if you know anything about what's going on now, well, even nowadays, it's been going on since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Azerbaijan and Armenia have kind of had this boiling under type war that's kind of gone hot and cold for the last 30 or so years. And I think in 2020-ish, in the last 5 years, the Azerbaijani retook, like there's like this enclave or exclave. I can't remember which way it is. Like there's a little piece of Armenia within Azerbaijan or vice versa. And they're trying to, basically ethnic cleanse that area to make it so it's not there anymore. And I'm only giving you a very simple account. I don't know that much about it, but these guys obviously that's important for them. And the Turkish government supports the Azerbaijani. So it's 100 years later they're still trying to stick it to the Armenians. So I think that's Shavo, the bassist. That's Darren, the guitarist. Is that someone there? I can't even see who that is. Looks like a frog. I think that's John, the drummer, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, a pretty great debut album, in my opinion. Next, after this, they released Toxicity. Toxicity is the only album of theirs that I don't own. I have owned it twice before. It's one of those albums that I've had the chance to buy it for like $5 or $6, maybe 10 times over the last 5 years. But because I think eventually I'll find it somewhere for 50 cents or $1, I kind of hold off on buying it, if you know what I mean. I've talked about this before, that there are certain albums where that was really big, and Toxicity was a huge album in many countries, including New Zealand. I know that there are copies out there that will be in a secondhand shop that eventually I will find for between 50 cents and $2. The original copy I won off the radio in 2001 when it was released. I remember it was the morning. I was working in a fruit and vegetable department in a supermarket very early in the morning. I think it was a public holiday from memory. So I would have been getting time and a half. And I was listening to the radio at the back, cutting cabbages or whatever it was you had to do. You had to trim the cabbages and sort the onions. Those are the days. And they said, call now, be the fifth caller through, and I called and I got it. And I remember the DJ put me on air, as they do, you to go on air and they talk to you, and I was like so nervous. And he remember on that day there was a big cricket game. Cricket is kind of the New Zealand summer game. Maybe we were playing Australia or India or something, and he asked me if I was going to watch the cricket. And I can't remember the word I said. I said some ridiculous, awkward response like slightly or something like that. Just completely like a not appropriate answer. Like it could have just said yes or no or yeah, I think so. But I said slightly. Are you going to watch the cricket? Slightly. And he was like, his reaction was like, what the fuck? Anyway, I got that CD, and I sometime or another, I lost that or something, and I bought another copy secondhand, and whatever, I don't have it now, but eventually I will get it. I think it is my favorite System of a Down album, Toxicity, but I don't have it now, so I won't waste time talking about it. Their third album is this one that doesn't have a cover, artwork, whatever you want to call it. Steal This album from 2002-ish. Yes. Now, I always thought, and apparently this is a common misconception, that this was B-sides and outtakes or rarities from throughout the years. But apparently, that's not the case. And that's what Darren said on the interview I listened to this morning. And also, I just read something earlier, just before this, and same thing. It wasn't that. What the story was is that during Toxicity, they recorded, many, many songs. Maybe on Toxicity there's, 12 or 13 songs? And they recorded like 30 songs. And they were all good songs. But obviously when you're making an album, you can't put them all on. And you want things to flow together. And so they chose the track listing that they did for Toxicity, and the other ones were left over. And they somehow got leaked onto the internet, onto Napster or whatever file sharing program. And the band were annoyed about that because the quality wasn't great. And so they went into the studio and tidied them up and then released them, because this was released the year after Toxicity. And this is to be considered a full album. It's not a B-sides, outtakes, rare. It's not like an Incesticide by Nirvana, that type thing. Or what's another band that's done like that? there are other ones I can't think right now, where a band kind of has a really big selling album and not cashing in, but it is kind of a cash in, basically striking while the iron is hot. They release something to kind of tide fans over until their next full album release, which will take a while to record. Anyway, I think this is a pretty great collection of songs, whatever it is. It doesn't, like I say, it doesn't have that. I think there are different versions of the CD, because I also own this new back at the time. I bought it when it first came out in 2002, and my copy was like a CDR type. It was designed to look like a CDR, like it looks like blank, and then it had kind of just writing like that. Steal this album, like someone just written like, with marker across it. It wasn't, but that's what it was designed to look like. This one looks like it's a piece of art by John Dolmayan, that's the drummer of the band. So maybe there are several different versions of the actual CD itself. I didn't know that. Mine also didn't have that back inlay design like the same. It was the same thing, like I said, the steal the CD thing. Kind of like white with just System of a Down, steal the CD. Now, there's some really good songs on this album. I think this is as strong as the debut album. Chicken Stew is just, again, talk about nutty songs. The first time I heard that, I was just like, what the fuck? Because it is, if you've heard it, it's starts off like with this bass doo 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 doo, and I think it's Darren doing the vocals in the first part. Walking to the refrigerator, lights out, body's getting hard, and then it just goes straight into that again, a real bouncy dunga 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 dunga, and he's talking about pizza pie, and then he lists off a series of ingredients: pepperoni, peppers, mushrooms, olives, pepperoni, mushrooms, onions, olives, peppers, chives. I think I'm adding something there. Pepperoni, mushrooms, olives, onions. Anyway, but the way he does it is it's perfect. And then the chorus itself is, what is it? Therapy. And again, it's kind of like the rhythm is like simple yet so original and unlike anything else. Now, I know for a fact that song, Chicken Stew, had been around since I think the debut album era, like the late 90s, because I've seen a live video of them playing it at some club, like a club show. I can't remember the exact year, but it was when like Darren used to like paint his face gold and had his hair done up like an onion, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I don't know, maybe they re-recorded it for the Toxicity era, but certainly live, they were playing it 4 years beforehand, something like that. Produced by Rick Rubin and Darren, and mixed by Andy Wallace, mixer extraordinaire. Other great songs on this: Inner Vision, Bubbles. Man, there are a lot of great songs. Boom, New Guns. Every single song, those first 8 songs are what a lineup. Not a bad song among them. That I-E-A-I-A-E-I-O is a great song as well. The lyrics are kind of like, I don't know, he's like describing, I don't know, it's weird, like different scenes, like things he's seen, or it's hard to describe. But then the chorus, again, that kind of, that Middle Eastern influence, it's kind of like a chant. Like I can't do it anyway. And then Roulette is another standout. That's a song that Darren sings the lead vocal on, and Serge does kind of harmony with him, I think, in the chorus. But it's a very beautiful, just vocal and guitar, and then some strings as well. But it's it's like kind of finger picking the guitar, and as much as I said Serge's voice is, so important of a component to the band, his harmonies with Darren also, I think. Two completely, like I said, not amazing in the traditional sense voices, If you take them isolated, you could even say they're not very good. But because they're so unique and they kind of use them in the way they do, they work really well together, quite beautifully, kind of like imperfectly beautiful. In saying that, I'm not the hugest fan of Darren. I've just said I love roulette, but I'm not the hugest fan of Darren's voice by itself. It's a little bit thin. I think it works well as a contrast to Serge's voice. Not that they're super different or anything. And like I said, especially harmonizing, I think it's excellent. But in the stuff like on Scars on Broadway, like his solo project, well, not solo, but his non-System of a Down project, where it's his voice mostly, quite one-dimensional, and it doesn't have that super unique thing like Serge's voice does, and so it just doesn't have the same impact. So a song like Lives from Scars on Broadway, which I think was on the album in 2000, from the Dictator album, or Dictators, which is a great song and could absolutely fit on any System of a Down album, in my opinion. I just think it would be better if it was sung by someone else. And that sounds harsh, and I don't mean to sound harsh, but yeah. Anyway, moving on. Then we come to kind of a double album. Even though it's not a double album, they were released and sold separately, it was kind of made, as they were recording it, they realized they had a lot of material and they obviously didn't want to leave anything off, and so they released them kind of as a set or a series. Mezmerize and Hypnotize. No, I never owned that one before, but I did own that when that came out back in, was it 2005-ish? From memory? Yes, 2005. On American Columbia. So they both came the same year, but they were several months apart. I can't remember which was first. I think Mezmerize was first. I could be wrong on that though. I've got a feeling that BYOB was the first single that they released. I could be wrong on that though. Could be wrong. Again, produced by Darren and Rick Rubin. And I've talked about that before, that saying something is produced by Rick Rubin means that he came in and listened to it and gave his opinion once every 2 weeks. He doesn't do much actual producing, certainly not any kind of technical or hands-on producing in the behind the board. He listens to the tracks and goes, that's good, use that, that's great. Don't know about that one. How about we change the ending, or how about we change the introduction, or that kind of stuff. So the actual day-to-day production is done usually more by the engineer, and or maybe in that case by Darren. These are both secondhand. Like I said, I owned this new at the time, but I sold it before I went overseas, I remember. I'm pretty sure all the artwork is done on these two albums, by Darren's father. I don't know his name, something Malakian. He is an artist, as a visual artist. His mother was also an artist. She was I think she went to university for art, sculpture. His dad's a painter. Maybe all these, I assume all these. So the lyrics inside. Maybe it says here who did the art. Mixed by, engineered by, oh there it is, all artwork by Vartan Malakian. String arrangement by Serge and Mark Mann. But it's a great album. And I think especially the song Hypnotize itself, which I think was the first single from this one, is a great song. Look at that. I just noticed. Is that a bug? What the I think it's a squashed bug. Hang on, let me get some tissue to wipe it off. Maybe the last time I was listening, a bug. Oh, maybe it's not a bug. I don't know what the hell that is. Anyway, it's gone now. Yeah, it's a brilliant album. Like I was saying, the song "Hypnotize" itself, the first single, that was what kind of drew me in initially. It's a brilliant song. And then with "Mezmerize," also a great album. I'm trying to think which one I like more. Maybe I like "Mezmerize" a little bit more, having listened to both of them quite a lot. "Soldier Side" is a very beautiful introduction. That's kind of, I think it's the first one's there, and then is it on this one? I always get mixed up. And then "BYOB," which kind of, I guess, was the biggest single. "Radio," "Video," again, very much kind of got that Middle Eastern sounding chord progression or scale or whatever it is, vocal melody, the way that kind of Serge does his voice. Sometimes it kind of like there's this not vibrato, but kind of like a wavy thing at the end of the phrases. I can't do it, but if you listen to that song, you might know what I mean. "I'm on the radio," that part. He goes, "Radio." I can't do it. "Violent Pornography," it's a great song. I never really know what he's talking about though. "It's a non-stop disco, bet you it's Nabisco, bet you don't know." Nabisco is the company that makes Oreos, isn't it? And then the very end of that song, which is one of the sometimes it'll just be like a line in a song that is perfect. That song, so it goes along, kind of repeats itself quite a lot through and it's like very similar. Everybody. That's how majority of the song goes. But then at the end, it gets does this kind of these longer sweeping guitar chords, like open guitar chords. Jing, jing. I'm not sure. What does he say? Oh, that's right. "It's on your TV. It's on your TV." And then the last line he says, "Turn off your TV." So the last pass of that phrase. So he says it's on your TV a bunch of times, and then the last one, "Turn off your TV," and then it goes, Darren goes, "Can you spell brainwashing?" Brainwashing, like that. Those two parts I've always loved. It's just like kind of like 15 seconds of the song. But yeah, great album. And there's the band: Serge, Darren, if you can see him, Chavo, and John. And they haven't made an album since. They did release 2 singles, I guess you'd call them, around about when that whole Armenian Azerbaijani thing heated up again recently in the last 5 years. What is it? "Protect the Land," "Protect Our Land," something like that, and "Humanoids," or "All the Humanoids." I can't remember this. I listened to them, but they weren't bad at all. It sounded like System of a Down, but I didn't listen to them enough to really form a full opinion on them. So they haven't released an album since because they can't come to terms with. So in most of these albums, especially the first 2, Darren wrote all the music, Serge wrote most of the lyrics and sung most of the lyrics. And as time progressed, Darren wanted to sing more lyrics, and also write more lyrics, and Serge wanted to write more music. And maybe they couldn't agree on that aspect. They didn't want to give up, or it wasn't enough give and take between the two, and so they went on hiatus. And Serge has released solo albums, which I've listened to bits and pieces of. If someone offered me one to buy, I probably wouldn't buy them. And then Darren has, like I said, has got the project Scars on Broadway, which I think is a little bit better. No, I'd say actually a lot better than Serge's. I'm not saying Serge's stuff is bad. I just think Darren, well, like so many partnerships, it's they work well together. The nuttiness of Darren's songwriting complements Serge's vocals, I think. And I don't know enough about who wrote what and who does what to kind of say, well, this and that, but yeah, it's a shame. It's kind of crazy that a band that big and that popular just decided, okay, we're going to stop writing albums. They, like I said, they still do tour together, play shows together, and what Darren said in the interview I listened to today is like basically he said like he's accepted it now, like he has his creative outlet through Scars on Broadway. He loves playing shows together with the band. He loves spending time with them. Like he actually said, like he's become like friends. Like I guess there was a time there where they kind of got quite tense, and then maybe the relationship wasn't good. But he says he values the friendship that he has with Serge now so much that he almost doesn't want to put that in jeopardy by going back into the studio and trying to do an album together, which I think is quite beautiful. If you know what I mean. But like he says, like Darren says, is like basically the songs that are on the Scars on Broadway album are, it's not as though he writes this way for Scars and this way for System of a Down. The songs that are on the Scars on Broadway albums are ones that would have been on a System of a Down album if they had been making them for the last 20 years. You know what I mean? And he says, yeah, the songs that they used 5 years ago for that whole Armenian charity thing were originally Scars on Broadway's slated songs that were going to be on a Scars on Broadway album. So I guess if you're interested to know what System of a Down might sound like in 2025, just listen to his most recent album or the last two albums, and maybe Serge's stuff. As for Chavo and John was in Scars on Broadway for a while, the first 6 years. I know he's very pro-Trump, which probably is a bone of contention with Serge because he's politically the diametric opposite. And I think they're actually brothers-in-law. One of them married the other one's sister. So that must be an interesting family Christmas. But apparently they like, from what they both said, they're like, once they're together, like in person, they're absolutely fine. They get on really well together. But sometimes they someone left a message on the other one, some political post. I think it was a John Trump post maybe a few years ago leading up to the election, and Serge left a comment that was quite scathing. But yeah. Anyway, I've talked for almost 40 minutes and my throat hurts now. So maybe within, I don't know, however many months, years, I will get the last album to add to have the full discography of System of a Down. And I think overall a really solid band. These, and including Toxicity, especially Toxicity, there's barely a bad song on them. I've got songs I like more, but they really are albums of great music, if you like that kind of music. You know, I can imagine if you don't like that kind of music, because they are, especially in these first 5 albums, or the 5 albums they made, it's all part of the same thing. Even though the last two do have kind of more ballady type stuff, maybe more musical type stuff, if you know what I mean, not just kind of heavy riffs. It's all part of the same sonic universe and all very, not saying similar or samey, but if you don't like System of a Down, it's not like a band where you're like, well, I don't like them, but this song's okay. Well, that's not. It's like System of a Down have very much sound like System of a Down. And if you don't like Serge's vocals or Darren's guitar or riffs, things like that, then you're obviously not going to like the albums. But in my opinion, a really solid band that put out 5 very good albums. And maybe with Toxicity, I'd say a great 5-star album. Anyway, we'll leave it there. 40 minutes on System of a Down. Sorry. See you later.